radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network.
All right. Well, Fade to Black. How you doing? Here we go. Today is Tuesday, April 22nd, 2025. Let's do this, man. Is this where I say I'm your host, Jimmy Church, or did I say that already? Too many shows. Happy Earth Day, everyone. Yeah, it's Earth Day. April 22nd is Earth Day. An amazing week here at Fade to Black. Last night, Peter Benson was with us talking about his work into higher frequencies. And tonight, Ray Hernandez is here. And finally, we're going to be talking about his Beyond UFO studies and Beyond UFOs study. Yeah, there you go. I didn't do my mouth exercises before the show. Some people do that, by the way. They do mouth exercises, tongue exercises. I've never done that. I've never done that. Tomorrow night, Captain Ron Janix is here. He is the producer of Contact in the Desert and a very good and personal friend of mine. He's going to be with us tomorrow night to talk about Contact in the Desert, what is going on this year, but also he's a radio host. And I have been on his show a few times over the years. And he's been here too as well, but his insight into the phenomenon, he has dedicated his life to that. So sure, we'll talk about Contact in the Desert, but I want to pick his brain too as well about the current state of disclosure. Then Thursday night, he's back. Jason Martell of Ancient Aliens is with us. I mentioned this last night. When I first started this show so many years ago, one of my first guests, I think the first week we were on the air, was Jason Martell. Yeah. And again, this is like Friends Week here on Fade to Black, and Jason Martell is back with us, and he's fresh off of the Ancient Aliens live tour. Right. So be doing that on Thursday night with Jason. It's going to be a lot of fun. I do have 4 major events coming up, starting with next week, not this weekend, next weekend, the Contact Modalities Expo. I'll be hosting. I am going to present. Ray Hernandez, our guest tonight, will also be there. So will Scott Walter and Chris Bledsoe and so many great speakers and lots of things to do. It is May 2nd through the 4th, next weekend, 2025, in Delavan, Wisconsin, at Delavan Lake. Tickets and info are below. Then I come back from that for, of course, Contact in the Desert, May 29th through June 2nd, right here in Southern California in Palm Springs. Then I head south to Peru with Brian Forrester. That's in June for the Inca Celebration of the Sun. This tour is sold out, but we've got 2 tours to Peru this year. The second tour is in November. If you would like to go, click on the links below for Hidden Inca Tours. All the info that you need is right there. I come back from that, and I head to the East Coast for the Psy Games, the Psychic Olympics. Yeah, first event of its kind. This is August 1st through the 3rd, 2025 in Charlottesville, Virginia. Again, the links are below. All right, I did it again. See, let me explain something to everyone. All right. Oh, that's what I was going to say. Mouth exercises. That's where I was going. Oh, somebody help me, please. Just help me. When I first started at Coast to Coast, and I've never told this story, and it's a major show. for a major radio network, the biggest. Beautiful studio, assistants and producers and engineers, and all I have to do is walk in. Well, there's show prep and everything, but the show itself, I don't have to do anything. I show up, put on the headphones, and wait for that music to kick off. And this is Coast to Coast AM. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. I'll be right back. Right? Okay. All right. Okay. So I show up and the staff is there. And the producer at the time, she goes, so we start in 30 minutes. Do you need some privacy? I go, what? Do you need some privacy? Mouth exercises? Do you need to go and get? I go, no, man. Let's do that. It tripped me out, and not so much about me. All right, it's how do other, not coast to coast, but in general, how do other radio personalities behave? Right? Do they come in and demand a private room so they can go and do exercises before the, it just seems a little bizarre to me. And now here I am, 3,000 shows later. I've never done one. Maybe it would help. I don't know. But I just do the show. Come in, on air, let's rock. I've got a studio clock. I see where the commercials are. I know where to come in and go out. I know who my guests are. Let's just do this thing. And it really flipped me out. Like, am I acting wrong? Is there some egoed out, self-centered position that I need to be acting like? Well, no, I never did that. And that includes right now. I just had to get that off my chest. After all, think about how many that there for me. I'm going to bring Ray in right now. For me, I've got the countdown clock. Right here it is. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, bam. Right? Live. I've never been anxious. I've never been nervous. I've never even thought about it. It's go time. It's my gig. Let's go. And that's the way I've always approached it. Just like right now. I'm very excited. Ray Hernandez is with us. Now, I was talking to Ray before the show. I have been following Ray, like all of you have, for a very, very long time. He's had an interest in supporting this community for so long, but it's his scientific approach to things that I followed all of his studies. I followed the work. I've interviewed so many people that have worked with him too as well. And it's UFO research on both levels. We've got we have the physical and mechanical side. We have the consciousness side of things. And I'm right in the middle. I think both are there. I am so interested in the subject, but we have what is called the materialistic approach to UFOs and what could be visiting here. And that has certainly changed over the years, including my own opinion. We're going to be talking about a term that he coined, contact modalities. We're going to be at the Contact Modalities Expo next week together, and we're going to talk tonight about space-time manipulation. We're talking about healing, abductions, paranormal encounters, and of course his A Greater Reality book series and documentary. He is the director of the Consciousness and Contact Research Institute, CCRI, a team of over 25 Ph.D. academics, medical doctors, and researchers exploring consciousness and paranormal experiences, or contact modalities. He's a former National Science Foundation Ph.D. fellow at the UC Berkeley, and he has authored and co-edited multiple books, including Beyond UFOs and the 6 volumes of Greater Reality series. I would like to welcome, for the first time to Fade to Black, the one and only Ray Hernandez. Ray, what's going on, man?
Thank you, Jimmy. I was practicing my phonetics. Do, 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 Ray, me, fa, fa, until, you jumped in here in the middle of it.
Yeah. Well, see, you're going to speak.
It's an honor to be on your show.
Yeah. Thank you, Ray. Thank you, Ray. And you will speak with total clarity tonight, and I will not. So there you go. The thing is, Ray, I before we get into the Beyond UFO studies, I want to talk about you for a second. To run in the circles of academia, which is a pretty touchy atmosphere, we both know that. And then to step outside those boundaries that seem to be limiting academics when it comes to the paranormal, supernatural, contact, ET, and consciousness too, as well, which is a big part of that. What was there for you to take the leap and go in this direction? Did you grow up with interest in this subject? Was it your family, your parents? What happened?
I would have thought you were a kook before 2012. And every speaker before you were nut jobs. I was a total materialist, complete atheist. And then it was one initial experience, which involved the medical healing of our paralyzed dog by an energy being, witnessed by myself and my ex-wife, that then began paranormal experiences, which to this day. But what happened was that for many, many years, I kept quiet about these experiences, because if you're going to be doing academic research, it's not too hospitable to talk about experiences that involve a manipulation of space-time and other paranormal experiences. But then as I got more into this work, I realized that many of the professors I had been working with and many of the researchers had also kept quiet with some of their most profound experiences. And so that's why I wrote my latest book about my personal experiences. And that only contains like 10% of my experiences. But some of them are doozy. And I just was quiet about them for many, many, many years until recently. And the title of my new book is A Greater Reality, One Man's Journey of Discovery. And that also happens to be the title of our new documentary, which is an academic-based documentary involving PhD academics, medical doctors, and numerous major experiencers.
Why do you think, Ray, academics, PhD and others, and I don't have a PhD, I don't, but why is it PhDs and somebody that has spent a career in academia, they're no different than us. They have the same experiences. They see strange things. They may have a ghost in their house, right? And putting spirituality aside or religious beliefs, we can touch upon that. But they have those experiences. They're no, and why are they so reticent and afraid to express them?
Well, the academics involved in my organization, the vast majority of them have had paranormal related type of experiences. And again, the majority of those individuals have gone public with some of their experiences. And so you're correct. Academics are just like everyone else in society. But everyone else in society stays quiet about their experiences. If you would ask all of your friends and all of your family members, how many of you have seen a deceased person? Okay. And you would tell them, look, tell me the truth. Don't BS me. Right. And I'm sure a very large percentage of them will come open with some of their paranormal experiences, including seeing a ghost or a spirit. Okay. It's very common, but who are you going to tell that to? Because once you tell that to someone, all of a sudden, they label you and you lose credibility. And so in my case, my experiences initially was with this energy being, and then I would call down UFOs at will, and there wouldn't be these little orbs that people capture on film. There'll be these huge objects, and many times they will be with other people as well. I've had out-of-body experiences and also astral travel experiences where I'm being taught lessons. Now, who am I going to tell that to? Okay. So you learn to stay quiet, because initially I told a few friends of these experiences, and then I was ridiculed. And so I learned to keep quiet. And also how I've had a series of orchestrated events. These are sequenced events, one after another. And at the end, I realized, oh my God, this is not a coincidence. What are the statistical probabilities of these things occurring back to back to back? Well, that's happened numerous times. And the most important one was how the Free Foundation got started. I never met Mary Rodwell, never met Dr. Rudy Shields. I never met Edgar Mitchell. And yet, after I was brought to another reality, while I was driving in the middle of a traffic jam, I was taught a whole bunch of information. Then within 3 days, I was introduced to Mary Rodwell, Dr. Rudy Shields, who's an astrophysicist from Harvard, retired now for 45 years, and then the late Dr. Edgar Mitchell, 3 days in a row. Immediately after I had that out-of-body experience where I was driving my car and I was transported to another reality. Okay, that's not a coincidence. I mean, I would have a better statistical chance of winning the mega lottery than that happened 3 days in a row. And then in terms of how I was given spirituality, same thing. It was 3 days in a row. I can go into those details later on, but I've had a series of these sequential orchestrated experiences. But you have to keep your mouth shut, because no one would understand you, let alone believe you.
With something like that, is it because you shifted your consciousness and your belief system, and that your antenna is, now attracting this? Is that the case?
Let me give you my personal hypothesis, which is shared by many individuals, especially people that had a lifetime of these paranormal experiences. Okay. What happens is, once you cross the veil of our 4D physical reality, and you either have an out-of-body experience, you have an astral travel experience, you have a near-death experience, that's a major triggering phenomenon, or you have a very up-close UFO encounter where there's telepathic communication taking place. All of a sudden, and I'll put it in layman's term, we can go a little bit more sophisticated and talk Dr. Edgar Mitchell's quantum hologram theory of consciousness, of non-locality, how that works. But for the layperson, what happens is that experience where your consciousness, your individuated unit of consciousness, i.e. your soul or spirit, gets brought outside of your 4D physical reality into these higher astral realms, it's like it opens a portal. And then later on, when you get returned back to this 4D reality, that portal stays open. So you're able to tap into these information fields. And that's the term that Edgar used, and able to receive more information from what I call the mind of God, which is the information repository of consciousness itself. And for people that want to learn more about that, how that works, of tapping into these information fields, I recommend that everyone read Dr. Edgar Mitchell's magnum opus, his most important article by far. And that was acknowledged by Dr. Rudy Shields, the professor of astrophysics at Harvard, who's a very close friend of Edgar Mitchell, and Dean Radin. Dean Radin knew him very, very, very well. And so that article we published in volume 1 of our book, A Greater Reality. And it's available for free from our website. And the website is agreaterreality.com. We have several books available for free from that website. So if you want to know a little bit more of the science behind that, of that question that you just asked, I would recommend everyone to go read that article. You're going to have to read it a couple of times. It's not an easy read,
Sure.
because it's written in physics language, even though it's not, it's physics based, but it's not too difficult to understand if you take it slowly and read it. But it provides an effort to explain how human beings are able to tap in to these information fields and get downloads of information, and to then later on get experiences, paranormal experiences, via the information fields.
It seems to me, and I don't think I'm wrong, it seems to me that science, the hard sciences, and specifically physics, in all forms of physics, there's so many now, is the numbers, the research, and the direction that it is headed is supporting and revealing what our community has been actively talking about for so long. That's the crazy part.
Yes.
Yeah. That's the crazy part. They're in denial about so many things. And you look at things like 11 dimensions or entanglement, dark matter, dark energy, parallel world, the mega, all of it, right? Quantum, the quantum worlds, and they want us to believe these things, and it's just like, wait a minute, they are that close to talking about everything that we have been concerned about in this community, and it's science that's been in denial that's helping support our efforts, right? We're getting really. It's a train wreck that's about to happen.
It's part of the science community, but there's another growing part of the science community which addresses your question. Let me give you a little experience here to put all this into perspective. Okay, let me explain to you how the late Dr. John Mack, who, for the people that don't know who he was a professor of psychiatry at the Harvard School of Medicine. Okay, a brilliant man. He began to research UFO contact experiencers. Now, initially, he was influenced by Bud Hopkins, because Bud Hopkins gave him people he had been working with, and the result was a very tainted perspective. But later on, when he wrote that book, his first book, all of a sudden you had thousands of people writing to him and communicating with him. And then he began to interview these people. And he came up with a totally different viewpoint of the UFO contact phenomenon. What he concluded was that UFO contact phenomenon was a consciousness-based phenomenon. It was transformative, and many other components. But let's just start with that. What happened was that initially, when he was processing all this information in his mind, he approached Dr. Rudy Shields. He's probably the most famous astrophysicist at Harvard. He had written several papers, academic papers, saying that Dr. Hawking was incorrect about black holes, and he published all these papers, mathematical, physics related, and it took several years, like about 4 or 5 years, before those theories were accepted. And they became accepted because Stephen Hawking then, 4 years later, wrote a series of papers stating that he had been incorrect on his theory of black holes, but he never gave Rudy credit. Okay, that's just to let you know the mind that we're talking about. Okay, is a brilliant man. So Rudy approached him and he said, Rudy, I've been getting a lot of individuals that talk about being brought to another universe, a multiverse. Is there such a thing as a multiverse theory? And Rudy said, yes, it's now rapidly moving in the astrophysics community. And it's rapidly becoming accepted that, yes, there are different words for it, multiverse, parallel worlds, multi-world, there are numerous very famous professors that eventually adopted that and expanded on that. So that's how he met Dr. John Mack. And Rudy pretty much was the only professor at Harvard that supported Dr. Mack because he had an inquisition. The Harvard University had a board to try to kick him out. And so Rudy came out and defended, yes, this is very real, the multiverse theory, and supported, and they were friends until his date of death. And so the physics community we had in our group when the organization, before the Consciousness and Contact Research Institute, we had the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Free Foundation. And we had over 15 PhD academics in there. And we had 4 PhD academics as part of that organization. And some of them you might know, some of them you might not know. One that I think you might know is Dr. Swanson, Dr. Claude Swanson, who wrote several books about the paranormal and consciousness. And he wrote several chapters about UFOs in his books. And then he's a PhD from Princeton. Okay, that's probably one of the top universities in physics. Okay, we had Dr. Jude Currivan, who received a master's degree from Cambridge University, and that's where Stephen Hawking taught. And she said, I'm not going to get much by getting a PhD in this because it's the same repetitive stuff. Let me study anthropology, where she got a PhD in historical mystical traditions. Okay, like the Vedic tradition, the Buddhist tradition, etc.
That's a tough degree. So she's a brilliant woman. So we had like 2 or 3 other people at that level. So it was Rudy, Dr. Swanson, Dr. Currivan, and other people like that in our group. And so these are all people that understood all these topics that you talked about. And they were at the cutting edge of developing a new science, a new physics to be able to explain the paranormal. And so what I did is I just piggybacked on our meetings because I was coordinating these meetings. And so we know that the paranormal involves a manipulation of space-time. And that's probably the primary commonality between all of them. There are numerous other commonalities, but that's the number one. And when you have a manipulation of space-time, what it does is that your consciousness goes outside of your 4D reality. Now, a lot of people would say, well, obviously, near-death experiences, you're manipulating space-time. Out-of-body experiences, by definition, astral travel experiences. Remote viewing involves a manipulation of space-time. Your mind, okay, is going outside of your 4D reality, and you're visually seeing information in spaces, okay, but still dealing with your earthly plane. Okay, seeing ghosts and spirits, you're seeing a dead person that physically right in front of you. Well, that involves a manipulation of space-time, et cetera, et cetera. Now, with the UFO phenomenon, what we discovered, and we'll go back to highlight the Beyond UFOs research study. Okay, but what we discovered was that these UFO contact experiences were having primarily paranormal experiences. For example, 80% had out-of-body experiences. 50% were brought to other multi-dimensional realities. And I'm sure many of your guests have acknowledged that via their experiences, okay? In terms of orbs, 60% have physically seen orbs, okay? Near-death experiences, 37% had near-death experiences. And I could go on and on with the paranormal topic, okay? That's what these people are having. In terms of the physical aspects of it, yes, they all acknowledge that they saw at least one UFO. And they all acknowledge that they had at least one type of contact with a non-human intelligence, okay? So that's why I put in the UFO phenomenon with that category of manipulation. Well, because, Ray, it's all the same thing, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. That's why. Yeah. What I was gonna, I wrote a book.
Well, let me jump in for the audience. A brief, very brief explanation of multi-worlds, many worlds theory. All right. Physics, the math is very clear on this. Here is a guitar pick. I put the guitar pick in this hand. Right? There it is. All right. Now, we know where it is. Now, if you don't know where it is, the pick could be in either hand. Okay. So if I reveal the pick being in this hand, the math supports the other version that there. Ray, stay with me. Ray?
Yes, I'm here. I thought I
Okay.
had it on silence. I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay, fair enough. It's this.
Sorry
The
about that.
math, the math says clearly that there is another me with the pick in the other hand. All right. And that, so the math is very clear on this. So what does that say? Well, there is another reality where the pick is in the other hand. And this one that we're experiencing right now with the pick in this hand is it, and that is the multi-worlds. And it has become so foundational and fundamental in physics and quantum physics that the multi-worlds theory isn't really questioned. So if that's the case, if that is what physics is telling us, it's also what you are suggesting here. It's the same thing. All of this is connected, isn't it?
Yes, I wrote a book on that topic titled "The Mind of God: A Virtual Spiritual Reality Model of Consciousness and the Contact Modalities." And in the front cover, I have a picture of a wheel, like a Buddhist wheel, like a ship's wheel, for example. And then inside the different parts of the wheel are the different paranormal experiences. And what I talked about in that book was that all of these experiences need to be studied and viewed as one integrated phenomenon under consciousness. So yes, you are correct. But yet that's such a difficult concept for people to absorb because it's not a materialist viewpoint. And let me backtrack a little bit. Our organization, all of the academics and medical doctors in our book, if you go to agreaterreality.com, you will see the names and the articles that these people have written. And all of them believe two basic hypotheses. Okay. Number one, that consciousness is fundamental. And that is almost an extreme concept for people to begin to realize. Okay. But if you look at Dr. John Alexander, who I'm sure you've had on your show before, okay,
Yep.
He also believes that. If you talk to George Knapp one-on-one, he might not admit it on the radio show, but if you talk to him one-on-one, he says, yes, I agree with that. Okay. That consciousness is fundamental. Okay. And you look at our book, it has all these intellectuals, all these pioneers, people like Raymond Moody, people like, there's not too many UFO people in there, but a lot of NDE folks, Dr. Eben Alexander, who's had a major near-death experience. He was a professor at the Harvard School of Medicine, a professor of neurosurgery, okay? And numerous other people like Jeffrey Mishloff, who has had a podcast for 50 years talking about consciousness. And I can go on and on and on listing names, but the point is that these are not just any Tom, Dick, and Harry that are presenting these things. These are hardcore academics and medical doctors, very well-known medical doctors, and physicists, PhD physicists in there. And by the way, there have been, if I can count correctly, there were 5 PhD academics that won Nobel Prizes. Okay, it's all in my book, The Mind of God, that accept the hypothesis that consciousness is fundamental. So if you have these PhD Nobel Prize winners in physics that have stated this publicly, then that means something, right? And then the other second hypothesis that all of these academics and medical doctors in our organization agree with is that, number 2, all of the paranormal contact modalities are all interrelated and need to be viewed as one integrated phenomenon under consciousness. Okay, and we could talk about those two concepts as we move along. But the other one, which is a corollary to all of that, is that we, as perceived physical human beings, are actually eternal spiritual beings, because consciousness survives our physical death. And so what I am doing is, in my work, first of all, we started with the UFO contact experiencer, because we might backtrack to go over that initial experience that led to this. Okay, but basically I was driving my car in the middle of a traffic jam. I was taken outside of my body. I was brought to another reality and shown a whole bunch of stuff. Okay, and this whole discussion can take more than an hour, so I won't go into the details. But basically, what we've been talking right now. Okay, and then and so the whole aspect of the contact modalities, the concept, came about from that particular experience. And this is about several months later, about 5 months later, after we had the group of these PhD academics involved. I wrote a paper titled The Quantum Hologram Theory of Consciousness and the Contact Modalities. And what it did is integrated Dr. Edgar Mitchell's quantum hologram theory of consciousness together with all of the paranormal contact modalities. So I blended them both. And that's basically what we're doing. But here's the problem we had back then, back in 2013. Okay. How do you compare and contrast NDE experiencers, out-of-body experiencers, astral travel experiencers, and UFO contact experiencers when there was zero statistical academic derived data on the UFO contact phenomenon? Okay. Before we began our research study, there was nothing. Okay. All you had was materialist perspectives. Okay. So what we did is we assembled a team of approximately 20 individuals. 10 of them were PhD academics. And some of the non-academics that we brought in were people like Kathleen Martin, okay, Barbara Lamb, Dr. Leo Sprinkle, Rosemary Ellen Gailey, okay, Brent Raines, who had been in the field for over 30 years, Mary Rodwell. So these were the people that have been working with UFO contact experiencers, okay? And these are all grounded people. These are not nut jobs, okay? Kathleen Martin has been in this field for 40 years. Same thing with
Wonderful,
Mary Rodwell.
wonderful. Well, all of them,
yeah,
very, 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 very smart. But
correct.
all of them are of clear mind and thought, and that's a very powerful group there.
So we put them together with Dr. Edgar Mitchell, who has a PhD in aeronautical engineering from MIT, Dr. Rudy Shield, okay, Dr. Claude Swanson, Dr. Bob Davis, who has a PhD in neuroscience, okay, and then we incorporate several other PhDs. One was a PhD statistician, Dr. Russell Scalpone, another PhD in information sciences, Dr. Raul Valverde, who helped to crunch out the data, the numbers, after the data was published. And so we developed 3 surveys. 2 of them were quantitative. 1 was qualitative. Qualitative means open-ended questions, where you got to write out your responses to 70 questions. For the quantitative questions, we had 700 questions. For example, we wanted to find out whether these experiences were perceived as positive, negative, or neutral. And we asked that question more than 25 different ways, because depending how you phrase a question, you'll get a different response, okay? And what we found out in all of these 25 questions was that initially, 37% viewed it as a frightening experience. And obviously, you all of a sudden, you're in your bed and you see these beings around you. And we're not just talking about the gray beings. The number 1 type of non-human intelligence that people saw were the energy beings. That was number 1. Number 2 were the human-looking beings. And then number 3 were the small grays. But I should state that the number 1 response was other. It wasn't any of the 12 type of beings that we put down. It was other. Ray, it's not there, you know? And like the weirdest one was a mucus-looking type of being that was clinging to the corner of a room and telepathically communicating. But people saw tens of thousands of different types.
Well,
of beings,
isn't that
okay?
shouldn't
And
that be expected? I mean, there's a lot of life out there.
well, not for the materialists and not for the people that spend all
Well,
their
right,
time
of
watching
course,
Netflix and
right.
watching YouTube. Okay, to them, the short grays are, everything.
It,
Okay, but
yes,
we found
yes.
out it's a small percent. Okay, now what we found out was that 37% initially viewed their experiences as negative, but the vast majority of these individuals continued to have experiences. Most of the people don't have just one or two experiences. You continue throughout your life to have experiences. Now, as their experiences progressed over the years, their viewpoint became much more positive. And eventually, for the vast majority of them, it became deeply spiritual, like in my case. And let me take a couple of examples, okay? All right. Whitley Strieber. Originally, you would read communion and you'd be
Scared.
defecating in your pants.
Yes,
Scared,
yes.
okay?
I
You-
pooped a few times reading that book. Yes.
Okay. And so he did as well, because it was a horrifying experience for him. But
Mhm.
then now recently he's written 3 books about God and the afterlife. And in one of his recent interviews, he gives thanks to the beings that he interacted with initially for giving him spirituality and allowed him to communicate with his ex-wife, and that he was totally misguided by his initial experiences. Now he sees them like angelic. Okay. Another case in point. Okay. Kathleen Martin. Okay. Very well known and respected UFO contact researcher. Okay. Initially, she wrote Captured. Captured. They horrible experience with my aunt, named Barney Hill. Okay. Now she's written a book. Her most recent book is From Alien Abduction to Spiritual Transformation. Okay. Let's take a look at a friend of yours that appears on your show numerous times, Chris Bledsoe. He's going to be speaking at the conference. Initially, he was horrified by these experiences, and now he views them as angelic. Okay, so these are just case in point. What we found out, that this 37% that viewed initially as negative, all of a sudden was reduced to 5% when they answered our questions. And then what we also learned was that these experiences were extremely spiritually transformative. Okay. And we also learned that the vast majority of these experiences, as I stated earlier, were primarily paranormal related. Yes, you saw a physical UFO, you saw a physical being, but the overwhelming majority of your experiences were quote unquote paranormal related, the full contact modalities. Okay.
Mhm,
And
mhm,
so,
mhm.
and there were numerous other findings, but yet our book, we've only sold 200 copies of that book, but yet we're the only game in town. No one else has ever done that. Okay, we published the world's first and only comprehensive academic, statistical, worldwide research study on UFO contact experiencers. We received over 4,350 people responded to our surveys. That's a boatload of people, 4,350 people from over 125 countries. And that's just in the English language survey. In the Spanish language survey, we had about 1,400 people that answered our surveys. Okay, the same questions. And so our research findings totally contradict what you see on Ancient Aliens, on Netflix, in these UFO podcasts. Why? Because no one has bothered to read our book, even though I was given opportunities to appear in other podcasts. But when people see that word consciousness in our title, all of a sudden they say, "Oh, that's woo-woo science." As a matter of fact,
And it's
probably the
not
most
though. It's
major.
not. Yeah, it's not. It's simply not. Ray, not only do I commend your work, but anybody that has listened to this show or followed me over the years has watched me grow and learn as a person. Okay? It's like I've been to college for 15 years. Seriously, it's not a joke. I mean, I'm interviewing the best of the best of the best nearly every single night of the week for 3-4 hours at a pop. if I haven't learned something by now, right? But here's the shift that people have noticed. I am convinced, Ray, when that craft shows up over Los Angeles, the mothership, live on TV, and the beings step off of it and start talking to us, they are, I don't think it's math that they're interested in. I don't think it's nuclear weapons, man. I don't. You know what they're gonna tell us? It's all about consciousness. That's what they're gonna say. And that's your next step in evolution. I am convinced of that, Ray. And to that point, that's why I've just followed your work so much. And before we move on, let me say this to you. I've talked about it a lot on the show, but Brian Greene is somebody that I respect a lot. I love all his. I just follow that guy. He's brilliant. But in his latest book, Until the End of Time, you know, at the end, he talks about the end, the beginning of everything to all the way to trillions of years in the future when the universe just disappears. Okay, all right. Everything, particles come apart. But this is what he says. He says, excuse me, that the last thing, and physicists never use that word consciousness. It's not in their vocabulary. But this is what he says. The last thing that will survive is thought. Everything is gone. Stars are gone. Lights. There is going to be clouds of thinking and thought. Information that will survive. And he says that without saying what? Consciousness. But it's his way of saying, you know, that and this is, you know, and he can't quite go there, use that word consciousness, but that's what he's saying. And it comes down to exactly what you are saying right now. That consciousness is fundamental. And Brian Greene agrees with you. And it's the last thing that's going to be around, and it will be the first thing when the next universe and Big Bang happens. When that happens, what's it going to happen in the middle of? A cloud of thought. That's incredible, isn't it?
It is incredible now, because the first time I'm listening to this, because I've never heard anything close from someone like Brian Greene, those words. But if he would have access to the NDE literature, to the out-of-body experience literature, to the astral travel experience literature, written by PhD academics. We're not talking about some Tom and Dick and Harry from the corner here, okay?
Right.
It would then explode his horizon. The academic articles on hallucinogenic journeys, okay? We have an article in our volume 2 book, Greater Reality book series, which is available for free. So if you want free stuff, okay, everyone loves free stuff, go to our website, agreaterreality.com, okay? And so we have an article by a PhD professor, okay, at the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine. And that's one of the top schools of medicine in the United States, okay? He's been doing research on psychedelics for over 30 years. We also have an article by an academic from the University of London, again, has been studying psychedelics for over 25 years, okay? And they both stated that the use of psychedelics is like a godlike experience, just like an NDE. They associate psychedelics with the near-death experience. And what happens in a near-death experience? People get joined with God, source, okay? So he says with a psychedelic experience, you're conversing, 50% of people are conversing with an entity that they describe as God, the mind of God. Okay, so it's a consciousness-based experience. So if Brian Greene would be reading these literature on NDEs, out-of-body experiences, astral travel, psychedelic journeys, et cetera, it might expand his horizon. And the way that it could expand is that he's viewing the end of our physical reality. So that means the end of our 4D reality. Okay, but there's a reality beyond the 4D. Okay, And that's what continues. And that's what the work that I'm doing and the other researchers in our group is, what is the nature of our reality beyond our 4D? And I include the UFO aspect of it within that. And that's the controversial component of why my work has, by we're talking about some of the top well-known ufologists in the United States, that they can get invited to every major UFO conference. I won't mention names, but they have labeled my work woo-woo science. But yet, these people that have called us woo-woo science, they don't have the PhD academics, but yet we do. Okay, we have neuroscientists, we have PhD professors of biochemistry, physics, biology. Okay, numerous areas that's hardcore science. Okay, in order to get tenured in one of these positions, you have to publish a whole boatload of scientific papers. So yet these people, they're not scientists, they don't have PhDs, but because the word consciousness involved in our book, we get put that label, woo-woo science.
What is the difference, as we're going to head into a break here, but I want to touch upon this. Can you explain the difference between materialist ufology and consciousness-based approach to ufology?
Okay, I very simple. For a materialist, they think in terms of the five senses. And Edgar Mitchell always said that ESP was the sixth sense. So for a materialist, you have to see it, hear it, taste it, touch it. Okay. How many other? I'm leaving one sense out. So
let's see. Taste. You have to taste it. You have
taste,
to lick
yeah.
the UFO. Yes.
Okay. So the UFO is basically you see it and you hear it, and very rarely people actually touch it. And hearing, you hear some people hear the noises associated with some UFOs, not all. The ones that I have seen have been totally silent, up close. These are huge objects, numerous of them up close. My wife one time did call down a UFO, and it did have this super loud noise associated with it. But then after a minute, it just disappeared, the loud noise, and the object remained. So for a materialist, I guess the simple response to that would be it involves the five senses. In other words, it involves the four-dimensional reality. Okay, and again, to explain the basis for why I use the term 4D, three dimensionals are the three dimensions of coordinate geometry. Okay, left, right, up and down, and then sideways. Okay, and then the fourth dimension is space-time that Albert Einstein invented. So that's the term that I use, 4D reality, which is our physical reality. Okay, but once you pierce the veil and you go outside of this physical reality, then you're dealing with higher dimensional realms. Okay, and that's what these people refuse to accept. They refuse to accept the concept of out-of-body experiences, astral travel experiences, the near-death experience, and they never associate the UFO with that. Now, they do associate UFOs that involve a manipulation of space-time. For example, I see a UFO right now and then completely disappears. Okay, What happened? It cannot disappear, so it's not there. That's the closest they come to going outside of this 4D reality. But Jacques Vallée, let me pose a question to you. Would you agree with me that the top two, the most important ufologists that we have known, okay, have been Dr. J. Allen Hynek and Dr. Jacques Vallée? Would you agree with that?
They're in my top five.
Okay, top five. Okay, I'll take that. Okay, I'll take that.
Yeah.
But
they're in my top five. For sure.
Okay, well, these two people and others as well. Some of them have been John Keel and Raymond Fowler, and they've been around UFOs, both of them, since Keel since the late 50s.
Well, and you have some of the older cats like Donald Kehoe. Absolutely.
Oh, yes,
amazing.
Of course, yes.
But if we look in a modern context, it's still Richard Dolan and the way that he approaches this. Now, see, and to your point, Richard used to be very pragmatic and black and white. He's a historian, right? He's not that guy anymore. He's going more and more woo. He's going more woo.
That's good for me, because one time he called our work woo-woo science, and I was very disappointed when he said that on a radio podcast. But that was about maybe 6 or 7 years ago. So I'm glad to hear that he's slowly changing. But the point that I'm getting at is that two of the fathers of modern ufology have stated that the UFO phenomenon involves a manipulation of space-time, and that UFOs are both physical as well as psyche. Psyche was their terminology for consciousness based. And both of them, Jacques Vallée and Hynek, towards the end of his life, not most of his life, but at the very end of his life, he did not believe in the ET hypothesis. Okay. And so, their work I quote a lot in my books, because these are mainstream, perceived earlier to be materialist ufologists that have a totally different viewpoint from modern materialist ufology. And how they differ is that they're able to see outside of the 4D reality of our physical reality. They believe it's much more expanded than that. And so that's what I think ufology is heading towards. And for many years, I was very, very frustrated with it, because I've been writing about this new concept of the relationship between consciousness and the contact modalities since 2013. And I've been very frustrated because very few people actually understand it. But now I'm seeing more and more that this concept is being embraced by the field of ufology.
And a very interesting shift happened. But I want to say this. We as humans only know what we know. We don't know what we don't know. So our brain inside of is the same as a 10,000-year-old human. But did they know what we know today? No, because they didn't know it. They weren't exposed to it, right? And so every day that goes by, our knowledge base increases. So today in 2025, this is my opinion, Ray, we now know about space-time. We understand more about consciousness. We understand more about physics and the science world. And with that, if we push this back to the 1950s, when everything was a flying saucer, a metallic, and a physical craft, today they were seeing the same things materialize and disappear, but they didn't know how to express it because they didn't have the knowledge base. Today, we have the ability to understand and observe things differently. So I believe that there are still physical craft. I do. But there's other things happening at the same time. And we understand that today because we have a knowledge base. And it's your work that helps us understand what we know. You know, to be very blunt, when I have seen a physical craft myself, okay, with witnesses, appear and disappear, a physical craft, metallic, right? I've seen appear and disappear. Well, years ago, it wouldn't be an interdimensional situation. It's something else. It was shielding itself. It was invisible. Those are the words that we used. Today, it's an interdimensional space-time consideration. And we have to look at it in so many different ways now. And we have the ability to understand. And we've never had that in the past. Mm-hmm. And that's what I find so compelling and interesting.
Let me make a suggestion. When we come outside of the break, if we can talk about my second major experience, was the very first UFO that I called down, because that led me towards the path that I'm going right now.
Yeah, and now see, and that's another interesting part. And I want to do deep dive into that. Do you feel that, yes, we're talking about that today. I can't wait to hear about your experience, and I've had them too, and so
Yeah.
many have had them. But it's been going on for millennia, just under different names, right? These experiences,
That's correct.
yeah. But they didn't know how to describe it, so maybe it was angels, or whatever, because of the knowledge base that I'm talking about. You only know what you know. But when you look back at the historical stuff, isn't it fascinating to go through that? It's like, well, I know what they were seeing. They just didn't know how to talk about it, did they?
Yeah, what I'm fascinated with is the Vedic tradition, which is thousands of years old, and they described multiple dimensions. They described the hierarchy of beings that they interacted with, both out of body and astral travel experiences, and then they described nirvanas, so-called UFOs as well, and the intelligence behind that. So there have been several books that have been written about in the ancient Vedic tradition and the paranormal and UFOs, and maybe when we come back, we could talk about those a little bit. But what I want to focus on is my initial UFO contact experience, which is the first of many, which led me to these very expensive hypotheses that you might not agree with, Jimmy.
Oh, I'm pretty tempted to agree with anything. It's about learning. People that what we lack on this planet, and then we'll take a break. I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to piss off a lot of people. Nobody listens anymore, Ray. Too many talkers. Nobody listens. How can you learn if you're not listening? You can't listen if you're flapping. And that's the issue.
And you have to keep an open mind.
That's it. Open mind, open ears. And our guest tonight is Ray Hernandez. We'll be right back after this short break. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. This is Fade to Black. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to get your alerts and access to over 2,000 videos. Click that subscribe button right now. Go to jimmychurchradio.com and get the Fade to Black official podcast. 2,000 episodes, all of them commercial free for just $2 a month. Watch Into the Vortex on Gaia TV. It's Fade to Black for the screen. Simple to do. Go to Gaia.com, search Jimmy Church, or click on the link below. Follow Fade to Black on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Get all of the show updates every single day. It's now called X, but who cares? How you doing? Jimmy Church here. Special announcement. Get your Fade to Black t-shirts. That's right. Help support the show. Help support everything that we do over here. We've got 2 t-shirts. We've got 2 ways to get them. Get your Fade to Black t-shirt today. Go Beckley Teppy. Go to jimmychurchradio.com and become a Fadernaut. Get a membership. That's right. Everything is commercial free. You have access to downloads, and you get to call yourself a Fadernaut. Today we're headed to Bolivia, Tiwanaku, Peru, and of course, Pumapunku. Brian, exciting. Thank you so much for everything, my friend.
Always an honor. Right behind us is the sacred river of the Inca that goes past Machu Picchu. So we're going to be driving up to its source at 15,000 feet above sea level and then down to Lake Titicaca.
So today we hit 15,000 feet.
Yes.
Crazy. And you can do it with us. All you have to do is go to hiddenincatours.com. Simple. We've got 2 tours coming up next year, one in June for the summer solstice, right? And then another one right here in November. So hiddenincatours.com. Come and hang out with Brian and I and his amazing team.
Right on.
River Moon Coffee, makers of the Fade to Black blend. Truly the best coffee on planet Earth. Just visit rivermoonwellness.com or their Amazon store. It's all simple to do. You can check out the Fade to Black blend, the Game Changer blend, or any of their Black Moon Wellness products. It's the only coffee I drink. It is the best, and it's Doc. Again, rivermoonwellness.com. All right. Welcome back, Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Ray Hernandez is with us. I wanted to share with everybody, I don't know if you've caught any of this, but I was scrolling over the weekend, just watching a bunch of reels, and I caught 3, and there must be many more, of these reels with my voice. That's right. AI. And I'm listening, and I'm like, that voice sounds, holy crap, it's me. And I'm listening, and I'm doing a whole narration on some UFO thing or Egypt or pyramids or whatever. And I'm listening, and I was fascinated with it. I wasn't angry. It's kind of a strange feeling to hear that done, because somebody has taken my voice and sampled it and then used AI to turn around and narrate off of a script. And okay, all right, I guess it's cool. And the first time I heard it, okay, and then it popped up again, and then it popped up again. And have you heard that? It's not me. Trust. And now, how do you determine what I've actually, somebody reaching out to me saying, okay, could you narrate this and put this through? It's not audio from the show. It's a narration from a script done with artificial intelligence using my voice. And okay, it's the world that we live in. I don't know if you guys have caught any of that. I just want to let you know, if you do hear it or see it, it's cool. I encourage it, but it's not me. All right. Okay. All right. I just wanted to throw that out there. Our guest tonight, Ray Hernandez. Ray, consciousness and the connection with UFOs and your experience that drew you into this aspect of ufology. What happened?
Okay. First of all, let me preface this by saying that what you just described with AI, the same exact thing happened to me. Okay. It's a different twist to it. You'll get a kick out of this. Okay. With that initial experience in my living room, where this energy being healed our dog, that experience deserved more detail, but I just don't have time to go into it. But basically, he was this energy being that made my wife disappeared, the dog disappeared, totally controlled my mind. I looked at it, I waved my hand at it, and said, this is bullshit. This is what she got me up for this junk, right? Then I turned around, went upstairs. An hour later, when I woke up, all of a sudden, I was like fully conscious. And I was like, oh my God, what the hell just happened? And I ran downstairs. And my wife reappeared again. And she looked down, and the dog was running around the entire living room, fully healed. Okay. Within 50 minutes, 50, the dog was fully healed. And so after that experience, needless to say, it was like an atomic bomb in my brain. The whole worldview was destroyed. Okay. And then after that, I thought that this was paranormal related. So I was on the computer, paranormal this, paranormal that. And about 3 months later, my wife saw this huge UFO, which I call now consciousness aerial phenomenon. I call them CAPs. Okay. And I've seen a few people use that term now. But in all of my books, I use the term CAPs, consciousness aerial phenomenon. So then my wife said, when I woke up that morning, there's about 2 months later, said, oh, my angels came and visited me last night. And then she described what it was. It was actually this huge UFO, except it was very physical. So then she would go out in the evenings at night and pray, and these objects would appear to her. When she went to Mexico, she spent an entire month. Numerous times they would appear, witnessed by her family members. One of the times, it stopped airport traffic in Veracruz Airport, and that on the 11 o'clock news, there was video of it that people took of this object. Another time, while she was riding her car, it was two cars, one behind the other. It was both cars saw this huge object come down from the sky, beam the blue light from the lead car for about a minute, and then the blue light disappeared, and then the object just shot off super quickly. So they all saw that. And that was what my wife had brokered a deal with a cousin of hers to call down a UFO at 9 o'clock. Okay. But it didn't come down at 9 o'clock. It came down at 9:30. Okay. And so that was happening with my ex-wife. And now fast forward now to August of 2012, 6 months after that initial experience. I was waiting for a friend of mine to give me his parking tickets. I was going to do a motion to consolidate his parking tickets. So he goes to court one time instead of 12 times for his parking tickets. So I said, I need the actual ticket so I can get the ticket numbers. And so he finally called me. I got it. Okay. Where are you at? He says, I'm very close by, but I'm in a hurry. He said, okay, I'll wait for you outside. So I thought that it was just for him, come give me the tickets and split. And so I'm waiting for him, and he doesn't show up. I'm waiting for him, he doesn't show up. And so then in my mind, I said, I'd seen a video of this guy, Prophet Yahweh, who was speaking in Hebrew in the middle of the day, and these little round orbs would appear in the sky, and he would capture them on his video camcorder, okay? And it was like hundreds of these videos that were on the internet. And so I said, well, if this guy, Prophet Yahweh, is doing it, speaking Hebrew, my wife is doing it, let's give it a try. What the hell, you know? And so in the very beginning, I was just killing time. Okay, that wasn't my intent. And then as I got more into it, I began to think of our dog as not a pet, but as a family member. She was like our girl, okay? And then after 15 minutes, I said, what a jerk I am trying to call down a UFO. I'm really going crazy. And then as soon as I had that thought, I looked up. There was a huge object that was right on top of my next door neighbor's house. The bottom part of it, these palm trees were blocking the bottom part of it. That's how it was to the ground. It was like 100 meters tall, 600 meters back. The back end of it crossed a 6-lane highway, okay? But it wasn't physical. It was comprised of hundreds of oblong streaks of light, very lengthy circles, streaks of light. And it was broken up into 3 segments of it. And then inside was this white energy inside of this object. And so then I heard a voice, and here's where what you just stated comes into mind in terms of the AI and the sound editing. Okay, I heard a voice, Daddy, you and Mommy have seen UFOs. Next time you guys see a UFO, don't call me Daddy. Don't forget. So I turned around because I thought my daughter was next to me. Okay, that was my first telepathic of many telepathic communications, but I didn't know what it was. I thought it was my daughter was next to me. So then in my head, it was, oh, my daughter wants to see this. My daughter wants to see this. So I run to the window. I'm yelling at her to come down. So she runs outside. Daddy, what is that? I said, sweetheart, I think it's a UFO in hiding. That was when I was still a materialist regarding the UFO phenomena. And then later on, I digested that. And I observed that I never spoke to my daughter about UFOs. My wife never spoke to her about UFOs. She had zero knowledge of these things, okay? What happened was this intelligence was able to tap into the Akashic records of, our conversations, the history of our conversations, was able to do what happened to you. AI spliced it up and put a sentence together, okay? And then was downloaded back to me in my mind. Same thing, right? Except this UFO intelligence. Then the next thing, my friend come, and he didn't come alone. He came with his wife and their 17-year-old. So they leave the car right in the middle of the cul-de-sac and they run to us, say, Ray, what the hell is that? What is that? I said, you know damn well what it is. And they was like, no, it can't be. It can't be. And then they began to try to explain away. Oh, it was circus lights. It was lights beaming up on the clouds and bouncing back. It was this, it was that, And so as they began explaining this away, after about a minute, I just busted out laughing. And again, I don't know why I did this, but I did it, okay? I don't know why. But what I did is I communicated with this intelligence, with my mind, and I said, I hope you don't have to edit this, but I said, you better come up with some better bullshit than this because my friends don't believe you, okay? All of a sudden, what we were watching, what I just described to you, totally eliminated, deleted, replaced by a totally different object. Now what we were all watching was about 50 orbs the size of Volkswagen cars. And they were all blinking on and off, on and off, on and off, on and off, very rapidly, okay, like 50 of them. But they were large. They were like a car. And it was much more compact than the first one that I told you about. It wasn't 600 meters back. It was maybe 100 meters all together. It was very close to the ground. And then they would take turns blowing up, one at a time. Not all of them, one at a time, and then blowing back down to the normal size. And then another one would blow up real big and then small. So my friends stopped explaining this away, okay? Now, let me analyze that situation, okay? This is where I eventually came up with the theory of holographic projections. And I want to add a story of Dr. Joseph Burks to that as well, okay? What we were watching initially, was that real or not real? Was it physical or non-physical? Because what we were watching immediately in a split second disappeared and replaced by something different. So if UFOs are real, they wouldn't be doing what they did, okay? Totally changed its form, its appearance, instantaneously based upon my thought, okay? Now, let me tell you now the story of Dr. Joseph Burks. Joseph is a dear friend of mine. He was a co-editor for volumes 3, 4, and 5. These are the experiencer chapters for a Greater Reality book series. Each of these books are 800 pages. So we had a team of 5 individuals together with myself that read each and every one of these chapters. Approximately 50% were not included. And so we just included the best, okay? So Joseph wrote a paper for volume 3. Okay, and Joseph is a retired medical doctor. He began calling down UFOs with someone who I won't mention that coined the term CE5 in the early 90s. Okay, and so one time he was driving on a 6-lane highway in California, and then he was going like 70 miles an hour. So running parallel to him, very low to the ground, very slowly at the speed of the car, was a World War I fighter plane with only one wing, but it was tiny. It was like 5 feet in width, and fire engine red with a yellow, like a bolt on the rear end of it. Okay, and so Joseph looked again, and there was no pilot. Okay, and he said it couldn't fly because it had these one little itty bitty wing on either side, like 5 feet. That's it. It says it couldn't fly, and it was going so slow, and it was like a helicopter, but with no sound at all. So after much thought, not at that moment, but later on, he concluded that this was a holographic projection because this thing could not fly. It really wasn't physical. It was a projection. And again, that article is in our book, A Greater Reality. If anyone wants to read it, just send me an email. My email is contactmodalities@gmail.com. And that paper that he wrote was a paper very similar to the book which I published, The Mind of God, a virtual spirituality model of consciousness and the contact modalities. So it presents his theory that we are living inside a virtual reality, and the UFO phenomenon is a virtual reality phenomenon, but with lots of details. So I encourage everyone to read that. And so, and then I started, reading more on the UFO phenomenon, because this was back in 2012, August of 2012. And then I realized that Jacques Vallée mentioned the same thing, that these were holographic projections. J. Allen Hynek, towards the end of his life, mentioned the same thing. John Keel, who was, as far as my understanding is, the first ufologist to talk about UFOs as being multidimensional. Okay, that was in the mid 60s. And then Raymond Fowler, again, I mean, one of the pioneers of modern ufology. He was the director of many organizations similar to MUFON, like CUFOS and a couple of others. I'm not into the history of ufology, but Raymond told me that he was the director of this group, he was the director of that group, he was the lead, researcher for this organization. So he's been involved from day one. Kehoe's organization too. He was involved with that at a high level, and so he eventually NICAP, yeah. So he eventually reached the same conclusion that these are consciousness-based phenomena, and what we're seeing are holographic projections. His most recent book, I wrote the foreword to his most recent book. It was titled Synchronicity. And so he discusses all these concepts in his most recent book. So it really is an evolution of his thinking, like you spoke about earlier, how he first started, and now at the age of 91, how he's thinking now. And so then another wacky experience that happened was that my friends just left after like 5 minutes of seeing these flashing orbs. And I didn't bother to stop them. They just said, "Oh, we got businesses to run. We're very busy. We got to go." And what I should have said, "What are you, freaking crazy? When are you ever going to see this in your life? Never. So stick around." No, they didn't think about that, and it didn't enter my mind. Another thing is cameras. Okay, all of us had cell phones. Okay, my daughter was the only one that didn't. She was 10 years old, but the teenager, 17 years old, had it in her hand. Okay, now the normal thing for a teenager to do, or anyone else, would be to take videos or pictures. If we would have taken a picture or video of that, we would have been on the cover of Time magazine for the next 40 years, because that's how close this thing was. It was huge, it was monstrous, and it was right on top of us. Okay, now how did they get rid of us? It was just my daughter and I now. Okay, all of a sudden I felt like I was being attacked by hundreds of mosquitoes. I was wearing shorts and a short sleeve white t-shirt. So I was smacking my arms, slapping my legs. And after a minute, I couldn't take it anymore. I was being eaten up. And so I grabbed my daughter's hand and I said, "Come on, Scott, let's go. These mosquitoes are killing me." So I went inside, and another interesting part was that the door was wide open. My wife was right there in the front, and the dog was sitting right there in the front door. And it's a Jack Russell Terrier. Right? These little dogs, once they hear people outside, they want to chew their leg off, And no, she was sitting there obediently the whole time. And then, so I'm telling my ex-wife what had happened. And then all of a sudden, my daughter looks up at me and she goes, "Daddy, there were no mosquitoes outside." And when she did that, it was like, I'm counting to 3. 1, 2, 3, snapped the finger. And like I woke up. I was in some type of hypnotic trance, just like I was in my living room. Remember where I waved my hand at it and I said, "This bullshit, this is what you got me up for this crap," And so it controlled my mind. And so I quickly ran downstairs. I grabbed my camcorder. I grabbed my my professional camera, ran outside, boom, nothing was gone. And so what I realized is numerous things. One is that with your mind, you can call down these objects. And in my case, every time they've appeared within 15 minutes. And in terms of these large objects, are the vast majority of them. I would say it's close to 100 of them that I've called down. Rarely do I see a little orb, that type of thing. And then I learned not to take photos or pictures of it, because you can't. Okay, they allow you to take distant orbs. Okay, a little ball in the sky. You could take as many of those you want. Okay, because there's tons of people that are doing that all around the world, in Latin America especially. I've known a lot of the major ufologists and contactees in Latin America. Most importantly, Sixto Paz and Ricardo Gonzalez. They were doing what is now called CE5 since the mid-1970s. Okay, and my friend Alberto Gonzalez, who's one of the top 3 major contact experiencers in the world, but nobody knows about him. He's a retired DEA federal agent. He's had everything in the kitchen sink. Okay, and I mean, if he were to speak at any of these conferences, he would blow everybody away. But he's been quiet. You know, that's how he is. And he's told me tons of stories because he's my best friend. And so the phenomenon, I learned that you could call it down and they'll appear in many cases within 15 minutes. But it has to be someone that, as I described earlier, has crossed over the 4th dimension. Okay, someone that's had out-of-body experiences, astral travel experiences, has had a near-death experience, has had communication like I have had, you know, downloads, telepathic communication with UFO intelligence. Those people, Sixto Paz calls them an antenna. Okay, those people can lead a CE5 session. My preferred term is not CE5, it's HICE, Human Initiated Contact Experiences. That's a term coined by Dr. Joseph Burks. So the people that can lead that have to be antennas, people that have had similar experiences before. Even people have had near-death experiences. Okay, those people are great candidates to do CE5. And so I learned that. That's number 1. Number 2, whatever this intelligence is, which I call the mind of God, okay, they have the ability to influence and even manipulate your thoughts. That's number 2. Number 3, they have the ability to upload information and to download information into you. Okay, and it doesn't have to be information from your life. It could be, like I said before, a re-edited conversation. Okay. Thirdly, I realized that these experiences are not necessarily physical experiences. You perceive them as physical, but they're not necessarily physical. And I guess the analogy to that would be this one. Okay. As we started off, I guess before our interview, talking about people that see deceased people. Okay. The analogy that I would make is you bury your Aunt Matilda a week ago. You went to her funeral. You saw her body in a casket being, you know, lowered. Okay. And then all of a sudden, a week later, in your living room, you see Aunt Matilda with her favorite Sunday dress. You even smell her favorite perfume. So the question now for your audience members is Aunt Matilda real or not real? Is Aunt Matilda physical or not physical? Well, the proper response is both. Okay, so that is my view of the UFO phenomenon. Is both physical and non-physical. It's a consciousness-based phenomenon as well, but we perceive it as physical. And that's the same conclusion reached by Jacques Vallée, Dr. J. Allen Hynek, and John Keel, and Raymond Fowler. Okay, but that only comes to the researcher if they're willing to, you know, view reality outside of the normal parameters of reality. And so another thing with the UFO contact experiences with the actual beings, okay, people are seeing tens of thousands of different beings. So now let me pose a question to your audience members. Are these tens of thousands of different beings, i.e., for example, in our research study, the humans came in all shapes and colors. There were tiny ones that were 2 feet tall. There were 15 tall beings. There were beings that came in suits. There were beings that dressed in robes, monk's robes, different colors, hair, you know, in terms of their facial hair. Some didn't have facial hair. Some had blonde hair. Some had, you know, blue eyes. Others didn't have. I mean, we can go on to eternity. Some were African American. Okay, many were African American, and many were Asian looking. Okay, tons of Asian looking beings. And in my books, I have graphic depictions from experiencers of all these multitude of beings. Now, with the Greys, oh my God, all colors for the Greys. Some had clothing. Some wore Yankee baseball hats. Okay, these Greys. insignias, different types of insignias. Some were very, very tall. Some were very, very tiny. So when you add all of this together, you had tens of thousands of different types of beings. And also John Keel and Raymond Fowler discuss these thousands of different types of beings in their books. And you need to have also in your show, Mr. Rosales, what was his first name? Goodness, Albert Rosales. He's published over 20 books, okay, on experiences on humanoids, just humanoids. You look at his front cover photo, and it's like everything in the kitchen sink. So now I pose the question to the audience members. Are these tens of thousands of different types of beings coming from tens of thousands of physical planets, in the vast majority of the cases for less than 30 seconds to interact with us? Or is the explanation a little bit more complicated than the physical ET explanation?
I would say
that's my question
it's
to
not
your
more,
audience members.
I don't think it's more complicated, Ray. I think it's more simple.
Yep.
Okay. I think it's more simple. I don't think it's complicated. And the first thing, and I want to jump back to the hologram aspect of this, but
yeah,
the universe is so friggin' big, and the amount of planets and star systems that are out there, it's infinite. It's that big. But even our own galaxy right here, the Milky Way, we have trillion planets. A trillion, not a billion. A trillion is 1,000 billion. And so when you look at it in those terms, how much life is just in our galaxy that is aware of our planet, and what technology, what technical level are they? Well, I would say that would suggest, I would posit very concretely that the amount of different contact experiences that have occurred on this planet is such a big number. It could be millions of species have been witnessed, and no two being the same. So that's my take. I think it's a very simple aspect of this. I don't think it's complicated. And but going back to your hologram thing, I have two comments.
Can I have a response to that, Jimmy? Okay.
Sure.
That
It's you're
perspective
the guest. You're the guest. I'm
is still a very physical perspective. It's a physicalist perspective. Okay. Because you're talking about beings coming here for less than 30 seconds from vast distances to interact with us. And there's actually, what you said, millions of beings coming here for less than a minute to interact.
They do
with
it
us,
because it's
okay?
easy, Ray. They do it because it's
Okay.
easy.
Okay. Well, my perspective.
We don't understand their technology. We don't understand their technology.
Well, my personal perspective is that these beings, quote unquote beings, actually do exist. They're very real, but they're not 4D physical beings. What they are, they're interdimensional intelligences. And numerous experiencers have spoken about their communications with these intelligences that have told them just that. There was one guest, I don't know if you've ever heard of him before, but I think he's probably one of the most important guests that you will ever have. His name is Yossi Ronen, Ronen. Okay, he's from Israel. And we could talk about him later on, but I think he's probably one of the most important guests that you will ever have, Jimmy. And I'll leave it at that. Later on, we could talk about his experiences, but he received telepathic download that they were not physical beings from a physical plane, that they actually were interdimensional, and that they could appear to us in many, many different physical ways. But that's my perspective of what.
But that
these,
it has Ray.
Yeah.
It has to be that way. You're absolutely 100% correct. But I also believe it's also other stuff too as well. If we if I do want to go back to the holographic part, but here we are right now, and we have 300 years of hard science applied to us to make us who we are today. 400 years, if you want to go to the extreme. That's it. So if there is a galaxy like ours, our star system is 4.5 billion years old. Our planet having life on it for 2 to 3 billion years. So if you go out into the galaxy and somebody, you can't assume that every planet or every life out there happened at the same time as us. So if something jumped on us by just a mere million years, how do we understand where they are at? We can't. So how do they travel? What is their physical side of things or non-physical? We don't, there's no way that we could understand any of that. So getting here or getting inside of our mind or appearing and disappearing and how they travel space and time, we don't have a concept of that. And having them explain it to us, we would never understand. We would never understand. And this is why your work is so important. I use this story, this metaphor. All right. You, Ray, right now you're in Miami. After this show, if you want, you could jump in your car and drive 20 miles for a burger and fries and a shake and drive back home. Order at a drive-through window with electronics and drive back home with your GPS and then eat your burger and fries. 100 years ago, that is black magic voodoo shit. You could never explain to somebody 150 years ago, yeah, man, I'm going to drive 20 miles, right? That's insane. And a burger and fries and have somebody cook for you and you order it on a drive-through speaker system and then drive in your car back home. They wouldn't understand that concept, but you could do it right now after the show. Why? Because it's easy. E.T. could be sitting in bed with his wife 10 light years away and go, you know what? Let's go to Earth real quick. Get a burger and fries. We could be back, honey, in 15 minutes. 10 light years. Why? Because it's easy. And we don't have that understanding of how they would do that. And that's what I believe is the case. I really do. They do it. They travel here in whatever physical setup that they want to be because it's easy. We just don't understand those concepts yet. I had two different people, one being my next door neighbor, a kid, and another being a business owner, very successful here in Los Angeles, who had nothing to do with UFOs, right? But he had an experience that caused him to check out things on the internet, and he stumbled upon me and Coast to Coast, and he writes me an email. We since have become friends and met. But this is what happened to him here in Los Angeles, without saying his name. He was in downtown LA with an employee of his, and they get out of the car. He sees something in the sky above Los Angeles in the afternoon. And what he saw with his coworker, his employee, he described to me as a mile-wide aircraft carrier. He said that's exactly what it looked like. It was a starship, but it was shaped like an aircraft carrier that was flipped upside down. with lights and everything, and he watched it moving across the sky and head out over the Pacific Ocean and disappear. And his thought was, why aren't we shooting at this thing? Where are the helicopters? Where are the airplanes? It's over Los Angeles and it's ginormous, right? Okay. Holograph, I would say, and that's what I told him. My next door neighbor, a kid, was out here in Palmdale. This is when I lived in Burbank, and he was my neighbor. But he said he was visiting his family out here in Palmdale, was woken up in the middle of the night, went outside, looked up in the sky, and above the city of Palmdale, he said was a mile-wide black triangle. And he said to me that he knew that the Air Force Base is out here, Edwards, and why aren't the police and Edwards Air Force Base concerned about this giant spacecraft that is above Palmdale? He said, right as he thought about that, it rose up and disappeared into the night sky. He saw it at 3 a.m. Both of these witnesses said the same thing. Why aren't people reacting? And I would say that they didn't see it, right? This holographic projection, which is what I think it was physical to them, but only visible to them, which goes back to what you are writing about and what this study supposes and presupposes to the world. I think you're right on. I think you're on target. And I've had people talk about this exact same thing, Ray. I don't think they're hallucinating. I don't think they're crazy. I think their experience was a real one. And it goes back to what Keel talked about and of course, Jacques Vallée, that a lot of what we see aren't necessarily physical as we want to know what physical is, but it's physical in the moment.
Yes, correct. They're perceived as physical.
And isn't perception of physical the same as physical in the moment? What's the difference?
Yeah, it's the same thing, physical in the moment. Now, whether it's that physicality is actually a permanent physical structure or not, like the chair I'm sitting at, that's a different question. And that gets back to Edgar Mitchell's quantum hologram theory of consciousness that you were going to ask me about a couple of while ago, and involves these same concepts. You know, whether something is physical, whether it's not physical, whether it's perceived physical, how information based upon your perception is analyzed in your brain. And so his theory of consciousness, basically, to summarize it very briefly, is that our reality is a reality based upon information. And that's what all physicists agree on as well. Except what he is doing is how the human mind is able to tap into these information fields. And then from these information fields is able to perceive the nature of our reality. For example, in one of his papers, he explains remote viewing. And he quotes Russell Targ and Hal Puthoff, two of his very, very close friends, because he was at the Stanford Research Institute when they were developing remote viewing. And it's a very, very complicated paper. And again, I would encourage everyone to go in and read his paper, which is available for free, volume 1 of our Greater Reality book series. And the website is greaterreality.com. And I had to read it several times in order to fully digest it. very complicated paper. Doesn't have any advanced physics or mathematics or anything like that, but just is abstract thinking, and makes it very difficult to understand. But for the gist, for the lay people that are out there, just think that, our brain, our mind, okay, and I wouldn't say our brain, I would say our mind, which is it encompasses the physical brain, but it also encompasses our own individuated unit of consciousness. That's the term that Tom Campbell has used in a lot of his books and articles. And so the relationship between our individuated unit of consciousness and the information fields of our external reality. And in many ways, we're, as you said before, some of us are perceiving this information. We're being able to download that information, and others are not able to. In terms of why the difference, I mean, I would win the Nobel Prize if I would be able to arrive that information. My best hypothesis is that once you have crossed over the 4D reality and have had these types of paranormal experiences, that makes you a receptive vessel for receiving information from the quantum hologram. And if you were to ask people that have had major experiences, Jimmy, you would see that these people, a good many of them have had a near-death experience when they were young, or they've seen a UFO and they've had telepathic communications with that UFO, which then led to a series of additional UFO-related contact experiences, like in my case. I never had a near-death experience, but all of this led me to having astral travel experiences, where my individuated unit of consciousness has been brought to these other multidimensional realities. Let me talk about Preston Dennit. I'm sure you've had him. I've had him as a guest before.
Many times.
Truly remarkable. Yeah, truly remarkable individual, and he's a good friend. Okay, his experiences started by seeing his deceased mother in his living room shortly after she passed away. Shortly after that, he saw Dan Rather on not 60 Minutes, the evening news, okay, CBS Evening News, talking about that acorn-shaped UFO that was piloted, the 747 that was piloted by these Japanese commercial airliner. Very famous case, okay? And so he then went to all his family members and said, oh my God, Dan Rather is talking about UFOs, blah, blah. And his brother stated, well, we just saw a UFO a few weeks ago, right outside the house. And then he interviewed his brother, he interviewed all of his brother's friends, and he got, a lot of details. So what does he do? He goes out and joins MUFON, okay? And then he joins Dr. Joseph Burks, calling down UFOs in Los Angeles, in the Los Angeles area. And then that leads to him saying even more UFOs and even UFO-related intelligences. And so the next thing he wanted to do was to learn how to do out-of-body experiences. And that lasted several years of trial and error. But he got Robert Monroe's tapes, and he began to have out-of-body experiences. And then he wanted to have astral travel experiences. And for many years, it was a failure. He just had, out-of-body experiences. Then one evening, he broke through that astral plane of the 5D reality where out-of-body experiences take place. And he began to have his astral experience. And the first thing he did was he called his mother. Mama, mama. Boom, his mother shows up, and they had a mutual experience in this multidimensional reality. And hundreds of times he has these experiences with his mother. So I would ask him, Preston, what, out of all the experiences that you have had, what has been your most profound experience? So he doesn't talk about UFO-related stuff, even though he's written 25 books on UFOs. He talks about his astral travel experiences. By far, nothing compares to those. And so Preston would be a good source to be able to do CE5, because he has crossed that multidimensional plane and has had contact with these realms. Same thing with people, someone that's had a near-death experience. If you had a near-death experience, like my friend Alberto, the retired DEA federal agent, okay, he's able to go outside with me and boom, we think of seeing a UFO and they show up within 15 minutes. And not little orbs. We're talking about these huge objects.
Right,
So
right. Well, I often wonder, Ray, I want your opinion on this. I often wonder how many have had a supernatural or paranormal or some experience and put it in a box and just put it on the shelf and forgot about it. You
Oh,
know,
I'm
and
sure.
just yeah,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, you know what I mean?
I,
And
yeah, I'm
they
sure it's a
they
huge
have
percent. Let, let me tell
huge.
you a story of my wife. Go ahead, Jay. Go ahead. Go ahead. You were going to say something.
No. You're the guest. I'm just the dude with a microphone, Ray. It's
Okay.
your show. It's
All
your
right.
show.
Let me tell you. Let me tell you an experience. Here, my wife was having all these experiences. She never told me anything about her youth. Okay. And
Hmm.
so we had gone to New York to stay a week in New York, right? We were going to stay in a hotel. And then a friend of ours that my wife used to live with, they grew up in the same state in Mexico, Veracruz. Okay. But very different cities, like 4 hours away. But they were roommates. And her friend was a biochemist, and she was a high school teacher in the U.S. She used to work for the petroleum industry in Mexico, testing water samples from the oil barges out in the ocean. So, very smart lady. And so then I told my ex-wife, I said, should we tell her? Because he was a very close friend of ours. And she said, yes, let's go tell her. So we told her what was happening. And then she started telling us was that when she was very young, for many, many, many years, she used to play with little grays. She didn't know the name of them. She just would describe them. And she
Right.
put that out of her memory banks, okay, all of her life, okay. And we like all of a sudden sprang it from her memory banks. And she described the typical gray. And she was never fearful. She said they were her friends, that she used to play with them. She used to miss them when they didn't show up. And then I said, what ages? Well, up until about 10 or 11 years old. So her entire youth. And so later on, several years later, my wife told me that she used to play with little people. I said, well, we're with the big heads and the big eyes and the little thin arms and things like that. No. These were people, except they were little. They were like 2 feet tall. Okay. And I said, well, were you scared of them? No, those are my buddies, And I said, what ages? Oh, since I could remember up until about 11 or 12 years old. So your entire life as a youth, you interacted with these little people. She said, yes. Well, who didn't you tell? No one. Who in the hell was I going to tell? And so, and in our marriage, I was doing this type of work, and she knew that I was doing this type of work. She never mentioned it to me. She just blurted it out of the blue when we were having a totally different conversation. And then I remembered that when we were with Teresa, which was years before, the first time we told the biochemist school teacher about, she told me about playing with the little grays. They both shared a similar experience, and that was they both saw these human-looking beings, but they could never see the details of the face. They know that they wore white hoods. They didn't walk; they floated. Okay, and it was like two of them. I think it was floated close to them, and then in both cases it turned the corner, and then it wasn't there anymore. And so they both had that similar experience. My other friend Teresa saw orbs, okay, very large orbs, and so my ex-wife then told her story of the large orbs as well, because they grew up when they were very, very young in a rural area. And so here are these two people that were lived together. They were roommates. They never shared these experiences to anyone. And then my ex-wife playing with the little people, she never mentioned that to me. I was doing this type of work. It just blurted out. And it was her whole lifetime. So my response to your question is that, yes, there's probably billions of people that have had these paranormal experiences, but for numerous reasons, they just don't come out, publicly.
Yeah, well, and like I said, they put them in a box, put them on the shelf, and probably forget about them.
Yeah,
And
like my
you know
ex-wife.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just forget about them. And then if you stop, I encourage everybody to do this. If you just stop one day, quiet your mind, and go back and think about and try to find that thing that you put in the box. Open up that box and re-examine that. What really happened? And I guarantee that there's something really fascinating there that you just, I understand life gets in the way, right? Yeah, and the next thing you know, it's forgotten about because I've got numerous situations with myself, Ray, where I've just quieted my mind and went back and thought about certain things. Oh, that sneeze came out of nowhere. See, that's the higher consciousness right there.
There's a signal there. You need to find out what was the reason for that sneeze.
Yeah. Where was I going with that? But because we don't have the time to go into this right now. And I don't know, I don't want to imply that I've had abduction experiences or I've had this or I've had that. Because I don't think that I have. At least not the physical side. But with the abduction experiences from the past, what happened to them? Are they still happening today? Or are they happening, but in a different form? You follow me? I
could give you my take. I could give you my take on that.
Please.
Okay. First of all, what we realized that the vast percentage of the so-called abduction experiences, they were out-of-body experiences. Okay. As a matter of fact, there's a linkage between people who have had near-death experiences. When they're returning back, they appear on a UFO ship. Okay. Or have had a gray appears. Okay. Or a humanoid being that's outside of the NDE realm. Okay. So that's a linkage that we really need to explore, okay, in more detail. And I plan to write my next book that's going to incorporate those concepts, the NDE UFO type of relationship, in a much more expansive way, because I think very few people have touched that, okay? And but getting back to that, we found out that the vast majority of these abduction experiences were out-of-body experiences, okay? Secondly, what's circulating in the literature in ufology about abductions, the vast majority of what's the most important information that's being circulated comes from David Jacobs and Bud Hopkins. Okay. Now, at most, these individuals work with less than 100 people. Okay. That's one thing. Secondly, they pre-selected the people that they would work with. Okay. If you ever had a positive experience, you were not called. You were not taken. Okay. We have an article by the ex-wife of Bud Hopkins. Her name is Carol Rainey. She wrote an article in volume 3. I think everyone needs to get that volume 3 of our Greater Reality book series that has, in my opinion, the most important articles, all in one volume, 800 pages. And there she talks about how Hopkins and Jacobs manipulated the field of ufology to lead everyone to believe that what these beings are all after is hybridization of humanity. Okay. And she goes into meticulous details of both Jacobs and Hopkins, how they would get these people and they would ask them leading questions even before their regressions, okay, and during their regressions. So, and then this is a time period that the vast majority of the people that were invited to these conferences were either one of the two of these people. So that's why
there's that aspect, Ray. And before we run out of time, what I am referring to, not the regression side of things and Hopkins and Jacobs, and that's a whole nother conversation for another time.
Okay.
What I'm referring to is Calvin Harper, Betty Andreessen, Betty and Barney Hill, Travis Walton, cases with witnesses where it was physical. This wasn't revealed in a hypnotic regression session. That's and the other part of it for me is I think that ET visiting us has to deal with things like radar, satellites, and tracking systems that we didn't have 50, 60, 70 years ago, where they could come and go on this planet freely without being detected. And so now they have to deal with the technology that we have on this planet now. So an abduction may happen differently than it did in the past, and that's I'm fascinated with that part of it. You know, why is the abduction experience different now? And it appears to be interdimensional, and that's my take.
Okay. Yeah, these are essential questions. First of all, let me backtrack by saying that the vast majority of these researchers have told me that they haven't had any abduction cases in years. Okay, many years. Why all of a sudden it just drop off the face of the earth? That's one question. Right. And then if you look at these so-called abduction cases, like you said, you will we noticed that the overwhelming majority of these cases involved out-of-body experiences that involved multidimensional type of experiences. And so we still haven't fully explored that because the whole abduction researchers are still focused on these physical type of abductions. Now, again, getting back to this question, people perceive their experiences as very physical, and it might be very physical, okay? But it might be multidimensional at the same time. Just like we talked about, you know, your Aunt Matilda, that sort of thing, and the UFO phenomenon, all these experiences. So this intelligence might be prying us as human beings, physical human beings, prying us, unveiling information about our bodies and where we're going and diseases and things like that. But they might be doing it, for example, like how our dog got healed. Okay, I'm sure that our dog was not put on an operating table and they cut her up her spinal column and her brain and they did brain surgery on her. Okay, that this is something much more complicated because a stroke, please, it's like your whole brain is destroyed. All there has to be all these reconnections of your brain cells. So it involves something that's not physical, Jimmy. You know. Now, in terms of the details, we just don't know. We just don't know, but it's something that's both physical and non-physical because our dog was totally paralyzed. And all of a sudden, 45 minutes later, she's running around my living room. Okay. And so we don't know the details of it, but what we do know is that these are multi-dimensional experiences that are both physical and consciousness-based. And the abduction phenomenon needs to be seen from that perspective. And so we really haven't explored that in detail. I would love to be able to have the time to review, you know, thousands of abduction type of cases, to interview these people one-on-one, and then to write a book that's a total new paradigm of the abduction phenomenon. Now that I'm retired, I've physically retired from my job as a Department of Treasury attorney that deals with billionaires and millionaires, looking for all the tricks that they use to pay zero taxes, because all of them paid zero taxes. No matter who you talk to.
I want those secrets too as well, Ray. Hey, Ray, listen, thank you for everything. I will see you next week at the Contact Modalities Expo in Wisconsin. It's going to be great to break bread with you and to hang out. And I want to let everybody know that agreaterreality.com, the link to Ray's website, is below on our website and throughout social media. Ray, safe travels to Wisconsin, and I'll see you next week, my friend.
Thank you, brother. We'll share a couple of beers or coffee, whatever you drink together.
Yeah, we will do more than that. Ray, thank you so much. Safe travels, my friend. I look forward to our next conversation. Thank you so much. Ray Hernandez, everybody. Perfect night on the show. Absolutely perfect. And what am I doing? I said it again. I do it every night on the show. Way too many broadcasts going on here. Tomorrow night, Captain Ron Janix is with us. He is the producer of Contact in the Desert. That's going on tonight. Ray, safe travels to Wisconsin. I'll see you next week at the Contact Modalities Expo. The links for the expo are below, and also for Ray's website. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Until tomorrow night, all I've got is go Beckley Teppy. Fade to Black is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee Newman, and Michelle Freed. Special thanks to Bill, John, Dex, Jessica, Dennis, and Kevin. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music by Doug Aldrich. Intro, Space Boy. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network. This broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2024 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Go Beckley Teppy.